Welcome back to the Radium Records channel. I'm Bradley Deniston, and this is part 2 of a 3-part series breaking down my song All My Love, which is a retro pop indie soul kind of vibe, lots of live instrumentation, lots of synths, keyboards, drums, vocals, it's all there. In part 2, we are going to be breaking down today all the synths and the keyboards and the guitars that I did in this track, who played them, how were they played, what plugins were used, etc. How did I mix them? Let's get into it. Hey, before we dive back into the session, make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel. I'm going to keep bringing you game on mixing, mastering, producing, songwriting. I don't want you guys to miss any of this stuff. Now let's go. Let's get into the guitars here. We have a bunch of electric guitars and they're all kind of doing different things, but for the most part, the guitar rhythm stuff is holding down everything. So here is the guitar rhythm, and then also this kind of signaturing the snare kind of electric guitar, which is super common in Motown and soul. So I love this part, but let's hear the rhythm guitars left and right. And these were played by Marco Flores. He's here in LA. And I have the Mixwave Milkman Creamer on this. So good. Absolutely, hands down, my favorite amp right now is this amp right here. So take note. No, it's really, really good. So check it out. Here's the rhythm guitars with the bass and the drums. Real creamy tone, really love that. But they're also going to a guitar mix bus, which has a little Pro Q3. I'm doing some mid-side EQing here, some little techniques. Throwing the 5K area into the sides and dipping out the middle where the vocal sits, right? I always want to make room for the vocals. UAD makes the best API 2500 model, hands down, no matter what anyone says, I don't care. And this is actually paralleled in. Awesome on guitars. And then finally, my little secret weapon here, the AP Great British Spring, okay? So this is from Audio Punks, and so good. Like if you want that classic soulful vintage spring sound on your guitars, this is it right here. So let's bypass all these plugins so you can really hear it without the plugins here. Real buttery, real smooth. And now I got this electric guitar that just kind of signatures the snare hits. And I really liked it because it's not an actual guitar, it's a sample. It's from the Mint Sunburst series from Contact. It just has this really bell-like quality, and it's not going through the rhythm guitar mix bus. It's going directly out to the stereo output, and it sounds like this. Now, it sounds really boring on its own, but I stacked that sound up with an organ playing that hit and a couple other things that we'll get into later in the session. But those are the guitars here. And then we also have some really cool guitars that Marco did that I really enjoyed. He did these kind of accent guitars over here. And I only use them in a certain parts because, like with every production, I want things to kind of like come in and out where you're like, oh, a new sound, you know? Maybe you're listening on headphones and you just smoked a joint, or you're in someone's car or something and you're like, oh, I never heard that sound before. And I love doing that in production. And so I used it here, and it's really, really cool signature kind of little riffy things that give you the sense of space and time. Check it out. And those in the mix just give it this really groovy kind of, you know, hanging out on a lazy Sunday kind of vibe. Here's in the mix. Right? So that's really cool. Now for the bridge guitars, these were a really important part to the bridge being really emotional and beautiful and powerful. And I actually didn't sing on the bridge because I felt like it just needed to have an emotional kind of break, a pause. Just like being in a relationship, you sometimes need a break. You need a pause. You need like okay, we've been arguing, we've been fighting or whatever. Let's take a pause and let ourselves kind of feel our feelings. Okay, so that's what this is trying to do. And I think Marco did a killer job on this. So this is the Milkman again. And then I have the Hitsville EQ, which sounds great on electric guitars, pushing some mid-range. And it looks like dipping a tiny bit of the 12.5, but just going through this thing also sounds really cool. And then we have the Valhalla Vintage Verb, which sounds always really great, but I have it on the Chamber 1979, and it sounds like this with these two guitars on the bridge. So great, so vibey, and with the strings and the arrangement on the strings, it really comes to life. So here is everything with those guitars. Just such a great feel. There's other guitars here on the bridge as well, these rhythm guitars. So these are doing this, and they have the mix wave, again, the Milkman Creamer on them. God, it just like makes me feel good, you know? Kind of makes me a little bit sad. But that's what soul music is, man. It should come from the soul. You should feel something from it. And if you don't, you're soulless. Just playing. All right, so here's the chorus. The chorus out has this really cool guitar thing that he did that I did not tell him to do. I did not write this part. This was all Marco. He did this kind of like accent thing in between, which just was so dope that I automated it up every time it happened. So you can see all the automation there. It's right here. I'll play it for you. Cool is that? That shit is dope. So kudos to Marco. That shit just came out so fire. He did such a killer job with this stuff. This has 1176 on it, UAD Rev A. I love the Rev A on electric guitars. I also love an LA3A on electric guitars, and I think most people do, going into the Electrodyne 511, which is such a cool plugin and sounds so dope. But this is like 500 hertz I'm pushing, and I'm bringing down the top. So I wanted this to really be chunky. There's already so much going on the top end here at the end. Strings, violins, vocals, cymbals. Like if you put top end in the guitars, you ain't gonna hear that shit at all. It's just a bunch of top end, right? Getting washed out in a mess. So that's that. And with the guitars, let's go into the Rhodes and all the really fun stuff I did with the keys. The keys were really like the root and the beginning of this track. And it kind of all started with this sample idea that I chopped up and did a bunch of crazy stuff with, but I have the, mini filter on it and then the Pro Q3 doing some stuff. But before that, I had stretched and time manipulated this thing. And this is where it kind of started, the idea of the song, straight up. Like, what a vibe, right? So this is what I had here was this sample. I chopped the hell out of it. I used the AIR stuff. I think I did like a slowdown on it. I had a phaser on it. I just kind of messed with it, right? And that was that. And then we have the Rhodes here, which is just kind of plain block chords. So all of these Rhodes sounds all came from Omnisphere Keyscape. It was just like a suitcase Rhodes, and I just manipulated the crap out of them by stretching them, time stretching them, warping them, and using different plugins. So some of the plugins, just to show you guys, because I know you guys love that stuff. Who doesn't? Let's turn this one on. And this is Omnisphere AIR half speed, right? So there's a bunch of stuff like that. So here's the actual keyboard sound if you guys want to use it, Omnisphere, the Rhodes LA Custom Warm. Okay, so it's kind of a bell sounding Rhodes. Okay, so AIR half speed and then the AIR phaser plugin. And these are just giving it a vibe. Like they're just really groovy. It ended up after those plugins to sound like this. Now here's where the indie comes into the soul part, is these synth counters and, you know, the warped kind of drunken Rhodes kind of sounds. But this synth counter came from the Mini Moog, pretty sure. Yeah, the Mini V4, just Arturia, and some compression. And then I just did like some mod wheel bending and stuff and resampled it in. Meaning when I resample it, I bounce it in place and then I might go up to like the region inspector box here and I might, you know, transpose it up or down, etc. So maybe the MIDI goes up an octave and then I bounce it in place and then I bring it back down an octave and maybe then I stretch it, you know. And you can stretch, time compressor stretch by option, dragging at the end of the region, and it'll just like compress it or stretch it. So I did that kind of stuff to make these sounds really kind of unique and resampled sounding. So they sound more modern, right? Like not everything just sounding like it's the 70s. You know, that's not what I'm going for. And if you think that, then you're not getting the nuance, and that's okay. I don't expect everyone to get it. I don't care if everybody gets it or not. But with the drums, the bass, the synths, the guitars, everything together without the vocals, you get this. And no orchestral elements yet. We're going to do that in video 3. I'm going to go through the orchestral elements, the strings, the horns, and the vocals in the next video. So make sure you click the link in the description to check that one out, especially if you're looking for all the vocal sauce. But here's all this together. Cool transition effect, and this will finish out this video. I just want to show you this. This was like a reverse piano thing that I like just went in and was like trying to dial in the volume automation on it, but I wanted it to feel like whoop, 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 you know? So this is what I did with this one. A little filter on this and Pro Q3, and that's it. But I manipulated the crap out of this sample, and you can hear it just as a transition element like this. And that's it for the guitars, the synths, the keyboards. I hope you guys really got something out of this. If you have any questions about what I'm doing here, drop them in the comments. Let me know. And like the video if you like it, share it, and go to part 3 in the description. And I'm going to break down all the vocals. We're going to break down the master bus as well. I want to talk about that stuff. All right, see you there.